So Brother James and to Peter. And he tells you three to come up with him onto a mountain. He says, I want you to leave the other disciples. So you do. Once you get to the top of the mountain, Jesus begins to pray, as he does a lot of nights. So you and your two companions, you're like, hey, we got to get sleep when we can, and so you fall asleep. But at some point in the night, you are awakened. And you look and you see Jesus has changed. His face is emanating light like the sun. His tunic is white like no launderer has ever made it. If you had to, you would say that he's emanating glory. What does that look like? Now, the three of you are fully awake. And as you see Jesus, he's not alone, but he's two men. Two men who seem to emanate their own glory, but much less than Jesus's. It's Moses and Elijah, heroes. Listen to their conversation. Both of them about his departure. But they actually heard. They're talking about Jesus' exodus that he will accomplish in Jerusalem. Now you know the story. The children of Israel out of Egyptian bondage and to the land. You remember that story every year at Passover. But what will Jesus' exodus be? The conversation seems to be wrapping up. And Moses and Elijah are preparing to leave. And just then Peter opens his mouth, as he is so prone to do. And he says, Master, it is so good for us to be here. Let us build 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Peter didn't know what he was saying. And at that moment, a bright cloud comes down upon you and James and Peter. And in fear, you fall to the ground. This is no ordinary cloud. This is the Shekinah, the glory cloud, the visible sign of God's presence. This is the cloud that protects Israel from the Egyptians. This is the cloud that descended down on Mount Sinai. It hovered over the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle. It filled the temple when it was dedicated, so much so that the priest had to leave because the glory was so great. And now, you are enveloped in this cloud. You see, man's not allowed to be near this cloud. There's a gap between man and Yahweh. It's sin. But you're in the cloud. And you don't die. But instead, you hear Yahweh speak. This is my beloved Son, my chosen one, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. You're on your face now on the ground. Peter's done it. He's finally said too much, and now all of you are going to experience the wrath of God. With your face to the ground, you wait. Nothing happens except the touch of Jesus on your shoulder as he says, "Don't be afraid." You look up and around. No cloud. No one else. Just Jesus. What do you say after an event like this? I mean, you saw Moses and Elijah. You saw Jesus in brilliance that words cannot describe. You were in the presence of Yahweh. And you didn't die, but you heard him talk to you. What do you say? And then, as you're coming down the mountain, Jesus tells you, don't mention any of this until the Son of Man is risen from the dead. What? What does Jesus mean, the Son of Man risen from the dead? You've heard it a couple of times, but you don't really understand what he's saying. I mean, you can't tell anyone what you have witnessed this night? This proves everything that you know Jesus to be. This is him. But on second thought, who would really believe you as to the things you saw? Why does Jesus say that? There's a paradox here that Jesus is showing to us. That glory comes through suffering. Jesus is joining the transfiguration with the cross. That the mountaintop and the hilltop are connected. On a mountain, Jesus is revealed in glory. On a hillside outside of Jerusalem, Jesus is revealed in shame. Here, his clothes are beaming white. His face is brighter than the sun. There, his face will be beaten. His clothes will be stripped from him, and soldiers will cast lots for them. Here, Moses and Elijah stand before Jesus, the heroes of Israel who represent the law and the prophets that point to Jesus. There he hangs between two common criminals. Here, Peter proclaims the wonder of being with Jesus. There, Peter denies him, that he doesn't even know him. And he and the other disciples flee in fear. Here, a bright cloud overshadows the scene. There, darkness engulfs the land. Here, the Father declares, "This is my beloved Son." There, outside Jerusalem, the Son cries, my God, why have you forsaken me?" You see, Jesus is showing us that his true glory comes through suffering. That the glorious mountaintop came as a result of what would happen on that darkness, or in the darkness on that hill. That in darkness was glory. And all of that suffering was for our benefit, so that we could share in his glory. How were Peter, James, and John able to stay in the cloud? They didn't come with a sacrifice. Jesus is the sacrifice. They didn't live a perfect life. Jesus did. You see, he made it possible for them to be in the cloud. In the same way, Jesus is our sacrifice. That by his exodus, by his suffering on the cross, we then can have our own exodus. That we go from the slavery of sin and come into the very presence of God the Father through Jesus Christ. As we share in the supper this morning with our Savior and with each other, let us reflect on his glory that came in the darkness and listen to him. I'll leave you with the words of John. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. And we have seen his glory. The glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace